All right, so I'm going to look at or describe the way I saw things in 2013 and how I started seeing them again that way in 2020. Like I said, in 2020, I looked at the videos that I made in 2013. And as I said, I was a leftist and I wanted race mixing. So just like some examples was, I was very much of a communist Marxist. So like, I'll just give some examples. I looked at things sort of through the quadrant paradigm, but I twisted the quadrant model. So for instance, like I said, I saw the NF idealists first quadrant as Asians, second quadrant SJ guardians as white people, third quadrant SP artisans as black people, and fourth quadrant NT rationals as brown people. And I wanted race mixing. I wanted and the first quadrant was science, Asians, second quadrant religion, white people, third quadrant black people, artisans, and fourth quadrant rationals, philosophers. And I wanted to make philosophy the ultimate, right? And I saw myself as an INTP rational. So I was a fourth quadrant brown person. I want to see myself as brown, as Jewish, and I wanted to race mix all the people. So I looked down upon the guardians, and as I said, first quadrant sensation, perception, response, awareness. Second quadrant is belief, faith, behavior, belonging, and that's white people. Third quadrant black people is thinking, emotion, doing, dreaming, and fourth quadrant brown people is contemplation, passion, flowing, knowing. And I wanted to think that the white people were the believers, and you know, there's that story. Well, and that's why I thought like the Indo-European, he believed when he saw Jesus, but then, you know, the Indo-European Roman, but then I want to say he believed, but that destroyed the Roman Empire and it saved the Jews. And the Jews don't believe because the belief is the second quadrant, but knowing is the fourth quadrant. So Jews don't believe, but they ultimately get in the flow, which is the fourth quadrant, which is knowing. So I wanted to invert everything and make Christianity I wanted to destroy Christianity and say it was just a way to defeat the white people, to defeat the Indo-Europeans and save the Jews and save the brown people. Because, you know, I saw myself as Jewish, I saw myself as a person of color. So the way that I would kind of interpret the Bible is the same kind of way. So like, for instance, there's a story, like I want to see when Elisha multiplies the bread. I was like, yeah, that was a metaphor of communism. He made everybody share, and they stopped giving their idols. They all started to share. That was communism. He didn't literally multiply the bread. It was communism. Because I knew that communism was an anti-white, because I always knew the Nazis hated communists. So I wanted to be a communist because I wanted to be anti-white and I wanted to destroy the white race, and so the Jews would win. So, but I wanted to prove, yeah, the Bible's actually communist at its core, which is stupid, you know. But again, my grandpa would say I was just expressing dualistic software. I had a predator-prey dual. I was very self-confirmatory orientation. I wasn't in the flow, but I didn't know what the flow was. And like I said, I always thought that my grandpa, when we talk about the flow and everything, it was just, I thought it was some race mixing thing. Or transcend the ego. I thought it was some race mixing thing. I didn't understand what he meant. So, like, one example would be like the story of Mary and Martha in the Bible. Mary gives, she wants to take care of Jesus, but she's kind of like obsequious. And she's like, Jesus, I know you're the Messiah. And she wants to like feed Jesus. And she's like cooking and stuff. But Martha, Martha's like that. She's like cooking and stuff, and she's very obsequious. And she's like, I know you're the Messiah. Like she's kissing his butt. When I was like, see, it's self-confirmatory. But Mary, on the other hand, she learns from Jesus, and she doesn't help cook and everything. And Martha looks down upon Mary, but Jesus says he likes Mary. And I was like, yeah, see, Martha kind of represents the SJ guardians who are the second quadrant, belief, faith, behavior, belonging, the good ones. But good is actually bad, and they want to take care of people. And that's self-confirmatory, but I'm an NT rational, the fourth quadrant, and I'm like Mary, who wants to learn and knowledge. And my grandpa's all into like working and stuff, like working, and that helps you get in the flow and get outside of yourself. I'm like, no, you know, the working is actually, you know, that's for the SJ guardians, and I'm an NT rational, and I'm the fourth quadrant, and that's what Jesus actually liked. And there's also like other stories in the Bible where like Solomon would have the Gentiles help build the temple, and I was like, yeah, that's what Christianity was. It got the Gentiles to help the Jews. But you know, and even in the New Testament, it had some of the Gentiles, like some of the Jews convert some of the Gentiles, but it had the Gentiles doing labor for the Jews. And I was like, see, it was just a way to trick the Gentiles to work for the Jews. And the Gentiles are the SJ guardians, the second quadrant. That's the white people, but the Jews are the fourth quadrant, brown people, and they got the white people to work for them. And it was just like a trick. as Paul says, give us your material resources, and we'll give us you our spiritual blessings. But really, it was just a trick to save the Jews, because I wanted to destroy Christianity, because I saw Christianity as maintaining white supremacism. I wanted to destroy our religion. I wanted to destroy Islam and say Islam was just also an outgrowth, and it was just to save the Jews. And it's all just a Darwinian trick to save the Jews. I wanted to believe in Darwinism, and I'll get to that, how my belief in Darwinism was very problematic, and it actually led to problems for me, because again, my grandpa would say I wasn't in the flow. I was in dualistic software, and I still believed in as a separate self, and I still identified as Jewish in a way that I wanted to defeat the white people. I was still in a very narrow, restricted form of consciousness. But like another example was like, let me think. There's a lot of examples in the Bible that I would look at. Like there was a story that I went to a Korean church, and the pastor was talking about how there was this was just like a regular church, but the pastor was talking about how Jesus goes through the roof and then he heals a person, but he escapes the crowd. And he was saying that escaping the crowd, that represents him, like, going toward like a higher form of consciousness and going through the roof, and that saves a person. But I was like, but I didn't have a higher form of consciousness. I was like, no, what that represented was he escaped the crowd and the competition of the crowd, which is representative of communism. He became a communist. Jesus was a communist, and that's what healed the guy, because what really gets people sick and injured and stuff is a capitalist system that gives people stress. And like Sapolsky had this show on a biology, like he had this documentary where he talked about this baboon tribe, and Sapolsky's Jewish, and this baboon tribe had the alpha males die, and then the tribe became more healthy because the alpha males they always had the first access to food, so they went into a garbage can, and they ate all the food before the beta males could get it. But then the alpha males died. But then this baboon society became more healthy because the alpha males died. And it was almost like a communist idea, like, yeah, let's just kill the billionaires, get rid of the billionaires, and we'll all be happier. And that's what I wanted to believe. I was like, yeah, the Bible's really communist, and this was a metaphor, Jesus going outside of all the crowd, which represents the capitalist system, and in competition within the capitalist system. And if we can go into the communist system, which would be going above the crowd, going through the roof, and break free of capitalism, then we would have a better system and more healthy. Everyone would be more healthy, and then people will be healed. Because really all the diseases and stuff comes from a lot, because as Sapolsky says, depression comes from stress, and it increases the glucocorticoids, which leads to diseases like diabetes. And if we could just have a communist system, then everyone would be healed and everything would be wonderful. And again, I was kind of a dick, because the reason why I liked communism so much was because I knew that the Nazis didn't like communists. So I was like, oh, the Nazis are white people. Oh, I'm a Jewish person. Oh, so I'm going to be the biggest communist I can be, and I'm going to defeat and destroy the white people. And I was always anti-white my whole life. So I just like interpreted everything in the Bible through this communist lens. Even if anything, I just wanted to see through the communist lens. So, like another example was, there's this one story. Oh yeah, I went to the Korean church, and the pastor said this other story about there was all these people, and they were sitting around this like pool that would bubble water, and they would run into the pool when it bubbled water, and they would get healed. And people say that's a placebo effect. But then Jesus comes to one of the guys and he says, "Pick up your mat and walk." And the guy picks up his mat and walks. And the Korean pastor was saying, well, so this guy he stopped trying to compete with everybody to get into the water first, and then he was healed by Jesus. And I was like, okay, that's another metaphor of communism, because he broke free of the capitalist system of competition, where he wanted to compete with everybody to get in the water first, and the placebo effect. He tried to break free of the competition, the capitalist society, and then he saw Jesus, who was a communist, and that's what healed him, because he broke free of the capitalist system, which brings about stress and brings about disease, and probably he had a psychosomatic illness, and that's why he was paralyzed, because he was so stressed under the capitalist system, he developed the psychosomatic illness. And I learned all this stuff at UCSD about psychosomatic illnesses and stuff, because I was a psychology major. And I would go to all these different classes at UCSD. But I was like, he had a psychosomatic illness, and it was induced by the capitalist society. But then when he broke free of the capitalist society and he decided to see Jesus, who's a communist, then he was healed, because communism will break people free of this competitive mindset that leads to destruction. And if we could just be communists, everything would be great. So that's the way I wanted to see everything. But now, just on a side note, my grandpa would say, like, even in the first instance, my grandpa would say, no, he didn't break free of the capitalist system. Going through the roof could represent, the flow, like transcending interpersonal or rationalistic consciousness, and going through the roof. The interpersonal would be the consciousness of all the crowd, but then he elevates to the transpersonal, and then which leads to healing, right? I'll get to my grandpa's ideas about healing too. And then the other one was like, the other one would be like, yeah, my grandpa says what Jesus did was, my grandpa said Jesus was always in the flow. So he knew what to say to get people to be healed. So Jesus said, pick up your mat and walk. My grandpa said this guy had excuses. He wanted to just have excuses and lay back and be, get attention and be diseased, because disease is self-confirmatory. And Jesus told him, hey, quit making excuses. Just pick up your mat and walk. But again, I hated my grandpa's idea, because I was like, that's just, yeah, because you're just a Nazi, and you don't in your. But now I realize my grandpa's not a Nazi. He's more of a Democrat. He believes in democracy. But I'm like, not a Democrat, but he believes in democracy. But I was like, oh, you're just a Nazi. You're a victim blamer. You blamed. You think that the guy had excuses, and that's why he was hurt. But really, it wasn't his fault. It wasn't because of his mentality. It was because of the capitalist system. The system of competition, and if we just would have communism, everything would be better. It's the white man's fault, So I'll just go through like just some more examples of how so again, I hated the idea of anything Christian. I hated the idea of anything religious, because I saw religion as white supremacy. I was a Marxist, communist. I hated religion, and I thought religion maintained the status quo and it maintained white supremacy. So this one example of that was, I remember, what was that story? So my grandpa told me about the story about this guy named Naaman, who, I think it was Elijah and Naaman, where there was this he was a king, and he went to Naaman, and Naaman told him, because the king had leprosy, and Naaman told him, we'll go into the Jordan River and dip your feet in the Jordan River. But the king was like, I'm not going to do that, and he left. And my grandpa told me the reason why that was because he was a king, and he expected some elaborate ritual, some elaborate ceremony to heal him. And just dipping his foot in the Jordan River, he's like, I'm a king. I'm not going to do that. But so my grandpa was saying this guy was run by his ego. He was and that's why he had leprosy. Now, again, I see my grandpa as a victim blamer, because I don't want to believe in these spiritual ideas. I want to believe, no, leprosy is just due to germs and genetics and germs, and, I wanted materialistic I was a materialist naturalist, but my grandpa saw everything as energy. And my grandpa would say, no, the king had leprosy because of obstructions in his energy field, because he wasn't in the flow, and because maybe he was too arrogant and he wasn't in the flow. He believed that he was a separate self, as opposed to oneness consciousness and awareness of oneness and pure awareness. And this was the king's fault. I mean, this was, and the king's, it's not the king's fault, because my grandpa said there is no king, but his software, his consciousness brought about the leprosy. But I hated those ideas. I hated the ideas because I always saw them as victim blaming, and I saw them as religious and spiritual, but I was a materialist. I hated it. I wanted to destroy religion because I wanted to mix the races, especially the white race. So like my grandpa told me this, but then so the king finally the king says, okay, I'll just dip my feet in the Jordan River. He dips his feet, and then he's healed. My grandpa said what happened was he let go of his ego. He let go of his arrogance, and he got into the flow. He dipped his foot in the Jordan River, and he's in the flow, because it wasn't necessarily the Jordan River that did it. It was his breaking free of the ego and the illusion of the separate self. So, but I didn't like that idea. And then what ends up happening is Naaman had this other guy, his like a steward or something, or his helper, goes back to Elijah, and he's like, because Elijah says, because the king says, hey, I'll give you all this gold or whatever, and then Elijah's like, no, I don't need any gold. But then the servant goes back to Elijah, and he's like, actually, the king would. I don't know, but he ends up trying to take gold from Elijah or something, and then that guy ends up getting leprosy because he wants the gold. I don't remember the story, but the servant wants the gold from Elijah, and then he ends up getting leprosy. But again, I was like, oh yeah, see, the Bible's communist. It's against gold. It's against riches and capitalist system. But my grandpa would say, no, that's not what it's about. See, my grandpa would teach that it's not against capitalism, but see, my grandpa wasn't a prosperity gospel guy, because my grandpa would say prosperity gospel is the ego. My grandpa would say, though, that there's nothing wrong with money so long as you're not attached to the money. My grandpa said money could be a consequence of value, just so long as you're not attached to the money. That's the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all evil. But I wanted to think, no, money's the root of all evil, and if we should have a communist system. But my grandpa would say, no, it's not money. It's the attachment to money. Because if you're attached to anything, then you can't be in the flow. And my grandpa would say the flow is inquiry and, constantly expanding your awareness to oneness consciousness and pure awareness. But anyways, I wanted to believe the Bible was communist. So I would go through all the stories. Like there's a story where this Jewish guy who's a left-handed guy, he goes up to this king named Eglon, who's a really fat guy, and he stabs him. I was like, see, the fat king, he represents the capitalists. He's fat, and capitalism is all about money and greed, and he's a capitalist, and Eglon's a Jewish communist, and he stabs him. And like, look at the story of Deborah. Deborah kills the king Sisera, who's wearing this fancy robe. And she the Kenite woman, and the Kenite represents the communists in the lower classes, and she stabs the king with the tent peg through his temple. And this represents the lower classes, the board. This is the proletariat destroying the bourgeoisie, the proletariat working class poor destroying the upper class, because that's really the problem behind everything. It's all the main problem is capitalism. And if we would just all be communists and everything would be great. And Deborah, after the killing of the king, she's happy. And because Deborah is a Jew and Jews are communists, and I was just trying to influence everybody to become communists. And this is what I did in 2013 with my INTP Central stuff, all the stuff I wrote and all the stuff I wrote on Facebook. I was trying to convince everybody that the Bible is communist because I was anti-white, but I didn't say I was anti-white. But I was trying to convince everybody that the Bible's communist. But, I later would learn from like rabbis that after they killed the ruler, after Sisera, the Kenite woman, kills the Canaanite ruler, they say that you actually shouldn't be happy about that because even he had a mother. And that's trying to break people into oneness consciousness and the flow and stuff. But my point, though, is I thought I'm in the flow. This is the flow, Grandpa. Like, I'm thinking that I'm in the flow and I've transcended the ego, and communism's the flow and transcending the ego. And if we could all just be communists, that would be the flow and transcending the ego. And let's all race mix. But really, I had an agenda. My agenda was to destroy the white people, get them to mix, open borders, communism, get the white people to give the brown people all their money. I had an agenda. And I thought that I was good. I thought that, because in my mind, I'm like, yeah, because the white man is Satan. He's the evil man of the world. But I didn't realize that I actually was satanic. I was basically Satan because in Hindu mythology, it's Satan who wants the Dravidians, the darker races, to destroy the Aryans, the lighter-skinned Brahmins, and destroy religion. And that's what I wanted. So, like, just one more example of that was, like, I remember on INTP Central, this is in 2013, I talked about the Salem witch trials and how, because I didn't want to believe the spiritual, because I saw the spiritual as white supremacy and religion as white supremacy. So I wanted to annihilate it. So I was like, yeah, the Salem witch trials, that was just, they believe it was demons and stuff. It might have been demons. We don't know. Again, my grandpa would say in the flow, you're open to all the possibilities. But I was not in the flow. I had a narrow consciousness. And so my grandpa would probably say that, maybe the women weren't in the flow and maybe it was the consequence of not being in the flow. But regardless, I want to say that the Salem witch trials where the women voluntarily became sick in order to act like they're demon possessed and witches in order to maintain the Christian society. So they voluntarily became scapegoats to maintain the Christian society and maintain Christianity so that the priests and everybody could say, see, there is evil in our world. And that would solidify Christianity within the colonialists. And that would maintain the white race by the women upholding the idea that they are witches. And it was the white women, and I was like, yeah, and that would solidify them against the Indians. And apparently even the white women got some of their ideas from the Indians about witchcraft. But my point was, like, I just wanted to believe it was all just Darwinian, and these different beliefs are just the consequences of Darwinism, and it was also, I wanted to believe it was capitalism, that also the white men wanted to take money from the old white women who were no longer contributing to the genes of the society and kill them and take their property. So again, I'm like, but if we would just all be communists and understand that religion is just delusions, and then if we just all became communists, and this is what the Bible really teaches, let's all just become communists, then everything would be great. And the Bible's actually communist. And that, I had a sinister motivation. I wanted to destroy religion, destroy the white race. And I knew that if I could destroy Christianity, destroy religion, destroy spirituality, I thought that I could do that. And maybe I was even a little successful. 2013, notice that's when things started to go downhill for the world. So I'll continue.